Welcome, friends. We are so glad you could join us again for another journey through the Psalms, another study in the great book of Psalms. We're glad that you're with us tonight, and we're just so thankful for every opportunity we have to bring you another message from God's Word. Today we'll be finding ourselves in Psalm 88. This will be the last psalm in book number 3 that we're going to deal with. And so next week we will be in book number 4 already. We'll be studying Psalm 90 next week. But for today, we're going to look at Psalm 88 right after our prayer. Let's go ahead and talk to God together, and then we'll jump right into our study. Father, we thank you so much for the day you've given us, for the health and the strength that we have to arise and to awake and to glorify your name. Thank you so much for your word, Father, that builds us and encourages us and shows us your heart and shows us how we can deal with our daily lives, Father, in you. Help us to be strong and courageous. Help us as we study Psalm 88 to see that problems are very common to all, Father, but you'll never leave us or forsake us. Help us to stay close to you in all we do, to be faithful till death, so that we might go to heaven when life is over. Father, please forgive us of our sins as we repent and confess those before you. We just pray that you will wipe our slate clean, and we trust in your promises that we can come to you boldly today with a clean slate, just if we'd never sinned. Thank you so much for truth. Thank you for the gospel and for the church. Bless us and keep us as we serve you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, Psalm 88. Let's look again at the background as we begin for Psalm 88. Psalm 88 is kind of an interesting, a little bit different psalm. Many of the psalms we've studied so far have sort of started out with maybe the psalmist in a deep, dark place. But by the time the psalm ends, the psalmist is in a bright spot. Unfortunately, Psalm 88 really isn't like that. The psalm starts out in a very dismal, dark place, and it sort of ends in a dismal, dark place. And so we really don't see much of a bright spot. There are bright spots throughout it, but they're not quite as obvious as some of the psalms we've studied. Let's look at the background. Now, the author, according to the superscription here, is a psalm for the sons of Korah. And now this psalm is also, according to the superscription, connected somehow with a man by the name of Heman the Ezrahite. Now, we don't know a great deal about Heman, but we do know that there is a musician named that name, Heman, and it's found in 1 Kings chapter 4 and verse 31, and 1 Chronicles 6 and verse 33, verse 37, 1 Chronicles 15, verse 17, and verse 19. And so we have reason to believe that it's the same Heman. He was a musician, and so obviously set in this book of Psalms, the poetry section of the Bible would no doubt lend it credibility to be this Heman that we read about in the book of Kings and in the book of Chronicles. The composition, according to the superscription, is labeled a maskil. And now it simply stands for a teaching psalm. And so a maskil is nothing more than a teaching psalm. And so what we're going to expect here in this psalm is to learn a great deal. Well, what are we going to learn about? Well, as we look at the summation, move from the background to the summation, we're going to sort of sum up this psalm kind of in a little capsulated box. And here's what it is. It is a slow, unbroken cry of sorrow. The most tearful and saddest prayer found within the wisdom literature. Someone has said that Psalm 88 is the saddest psalm in the entire Psalter, or the book of Psalms. From beginning to end, the psalmist laments, and he wonders why God has not already come and helped him and already rescued him. And so that's really his plea and his cry throughout the psalm. He wonders where God is. And a lot of the psalms we see that. And you know what? That's so applicable to us. And we'll look a little more closely at this as we get to the application section. But a lot of times we have problems in life. Life is filled with problems upon this earth. And sometimes we do wonder, where is God at? Where is God? I wonder why He hasn't come and rescued me. But we're going to see as we study throughout the entire Bible that God does not leave us. He will not leave us nor forsake us, Hebrews 13 and verse 5. And so we have confidence that God is there even during these dismal times. Some scholars have thought that the writer may have had a crippling disease, maybe palsy or leprosy. They're not sure, but some throughout the psalm, it gives hints to the fact that he's got something, the psalmist has something debilitating about himself. In fact, he says he's only a footstep from death. In other words, he feels like he's on death's door. It seems like all his friends have forsaken him. In fact, they can't even hardly look at him. We'll see at the end of the psalm. And that's why a lot of scholars believe maybe he had leprosy, which is a very common disease in antiquity and still is in many third world countries. We see in Psalm 88, though, that the fact that he might have had leprosy, which would have possibly lended credit to the fact that nobody wanted to look upon him, because leprosy in its very debilitating stages as it progressed in a person's life made a person very unattractive, very hard to look upon. Obviously, people without leprosy were not allowed to be around people that were lepers. And we learn that throughout the Bible. They were unclean and they had to be separate and apart from their neighbors and their friends and even their loved ones. And so leprosy was a debilitating disease. Now, whether the psalmist had leprosy or palsy or some other disease, we're not sure. It really doesn't matter to the disease. We see that he knew that he was close to death, and it seemed like God was not really answering him. Now, although the psalmist believes that God is putting his heavy hand upon him, the psalmist believes that this problem is coming, or at least being allowed by God. He doesn't confess any sins in this psalm at all. He just believes that the maladies he's facing are brought on about by the Lord's wrath. And we'll look at that a little bit closer. In most of the psalms we've studied thus far, as I mentioned earlier, we sort of see this dark place, but then it turns to a bright place. But this psalm isn't going to be like that. We're going to find this psalm in a dismal place as it begins, and in somewhat of a dismal place as it ends. But even though there's no bright spot that's very obvious for us, there are bright spots that we can pull out of this psalm as well. Let's move from the summation to the outline. And as we outline it, as always, we'll go ahead and read those different sections. Let's look at the first two verses in what we're titling The Cry. Verses 1 and 2, the cry. O Lord, God of my salvation, I've cried day and night before Thee. Let my prayer come before Thee. Incline Thine ear unto my cry. Now, I want you to notice two parts about this cry that are very, very important for us to understand, especially when we talk about crying out to God. Number one, there is persistency. Look at verse 1. O Lord God of my salvation, I have cried day and night before Thee. Do you notice the persistency? That is one thing we have definitely learned through our study of the Psalms. In this journey of the Psalms so far, anytime there's been a prayer, it has been a persistent prayer. It has been continual pleading to God. That's what prayer is. Prayer is not a one-time done and over with. Prayer is a continual pleading to God. And especially if we have a situation in our life, if we have a problem like the psalmist had here. He said, I am persistent in this. I've cried unto Thee day and night. And if nothing else we learn from this psalm, we will learn other things. But if nothing else, let us learn that prayer, a cry to God, must be persistent. Number two, we notice that this cry involves a plea. Verse number 2, let my prayer come before Thee, incline Thine ear unto my cry. What's the psalmist want? He wants God to hear his cry. He wants God to hear his plea. He's persistent in it. God, please, I'm knocking at the door. Please hear my prayer. Hear my cry. Look at me. I've got these problems. I've got these struggles. God, I need You. Are You not there? Are You not listening? And that's a natural response for somebody that is in his situation. We face troubles. We face trials in this life. And I'll tell you, dear friends, that we need to plead and beg God for help during those times. The interesting thing is, prayer doesn't always come the answer rather doesn't always come just overnight, does it? And that's one thing we learn here. He's pouring his heart out to God, but it looks like he doesn't get an answer. Now, I want to move from the cry in verses 1 and 2 to what I'm calling the condition, verses 3 through 5. We move from the cry to the condition, verses 3 through 5. For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draweth nigh unto the grave. I am counted with them that go down into the pit. I am as a man that hath no strength, free among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave, whom thou rememberest no more, and they are cut off from thy hand. Now I want you to notice this very carefully, the conditions in which the psalmist finds himself. What are they? Well, there are essentially three that we see right in the text. Number one, he is waning. Look at verse 3. For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draweth nigh unto the grave. What's that look like? It looks like he's about ready to die. He is waning. His life is waning. He is on his deathbed. At least that's how he feels. Secondly, he's weak. Look at verse 4. I am counted with them that go down into the pit. I am as a man that hath no strength. He's weak. And I'll tell you, if you've ever been in a debilitating disease, or if you've ever had a sickness that drew you near to death, you know how this psalmist feels. He is waning. His life is like fleeting from him. He's weak. He has no strength, which led him to verse 5. He's weary. Look at verse 5. Free among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave, whom thou rememberest no more, and they are cut off from thy hand. God, I'm weary. It doesn't seem like you're answering me here. I'm weak. My life is waning, and now I'm becoming weary because it feels like I'm going through this alone. God, if I go to the grave, I'm not going to be able to praise you. I'm not going to be able to talk to you. And so he's very weary with his situation. His condition is not good. His condition is not good, and that's one of the reasons why he is crying out to God. We see the cry in verses 1 and 2. We see the conditions in verses 3 through 5, which leads us thirdly to the cause. Look at verses 6 through 9. Thou hast laid me in the lowest pit, in darkness, in the deeps. Thy wrath lieth hard upon me, and thou hast afflicted me with all thy waves. Thou hast put away mine acquaintance far from me. Thou hast made me an abomination unto them. I am shut up, I cannot come forth. Mine eye mourneth by reason of affliction. Lord, I have called daily upon thee. I have stretched out my hands unto thee. Do you see the cause here? What's the cause? We don't know this for sure, but the psalmist is essentially saying, God, it is because of you, or at least you are allowing these problems to come upon me. He felt like God's hand was heavy upon him. Now that's kind of interesting. Do you remember the book of Job? Also a book in wisdom literature. If you remember the book of Job, you remember when Job went through his great troubles and his great ordeal. Do you remember a lot of folks, in fact his three friends were all essentially blaming God. They said, Job, you did something wrong. God's punishing you. And you remember even his wife, which I'm not being hard on Mrs. Job. She went through the same trials that Job went through for the most part. But she said, why don't you just curse God and die? She felt as though it was God's doing as well. The psalmist here believes the cause of his afflictions coming from God. Now we do know that there are times when God does chastise his people. Hebrews chapter 12 is very clear about that. In fact, God can bring problems upon us in order to straighten us out, in order to purify us. We don't know if this is the case of the psalmist. Was God really bringing this upon him? Or was it like the case of Job? Was it simply Satan living in a fallen world that was giving him problems? We're not sure, but he looks at the cause as being from God. Now, just a word of caution before we move on. I want us to think about this. I'm very careful, and I think we should be very careful of assigning something negative to God. If I go through a problem, the last person I really want to blame is God. I don't mind blaming Satan because I live in a fallen world and I know for sure that Satan brings about a lot of destruction and death and problems. So I don't mind blaming Satan for everything. But I'll tell you what, I don't want to necessarily blame God for any problem I have. I know that God does chastise his people sometimes. God allows things to happen, but we want to be very careful before we put the blame on God. We don't know the whole story. We don't know the whole story, and there's a good chance that God is not the one. In fact, it's a good chance that God is the one that's sustaining us through that trouble. And so let's not assign blame, especially to the God of heaven. I see this in a lot of people, that they shake their fist at God. I don't want to be in that place. I don't want to impugn God or tell God, it's because of you that I'm going through this. No, I don't want to do that. And dear friends, we need to keep a sober mind during these times. We leave the cause to number 4, the challenges. Look at verses 10 through 12. Wilt thou show wonders to the dead? Shall the dead arise and praise thee? Shall thy loving kindness be declared in the grave, or thy faithfulness in destruction? Shall thy wonders be known in the dark, and thy righteousness in the land of forgetfulness? And so the challenges here that the psalmist is facing are great. He's looking at 3 challenges especially. He's looking at number 1, death. Look at verse 10. Wilt thou show wonders to the dead? Shall the dead arise and praise thee? He's challenging God. He's saying, God, if I die, is someone from the grave going to come back and praise you? He's putting the challenge to God. Verse 11, he's challenging God with the destruction. Verse 11, shall thy loving kindness be declared in the grave, or thy faithfulness in destruction? God, you're destroying me. Is that something you really want to do? He's putting a challenge out to God, which to me is very bold in this psalm, but it is what it is. He's putting the challenge to God about death, about destruction. And then thirdly, he's putting a challenge to God regarding darkness. Look at verse 12. Shall thy wonders be known in the dark, and thy righteousness in the land of forgetfulness? God, if I die, no one's going to know about your greatness. If you cut me off from the land of the living, how in the world am I going to praise you and tell of your light? And so he puts these challenges to God. He is in a very low place. And the psalmist is maybe lower than a man can be at any point in time in his life. He's ready to die, but he's challenging God. He's putting the test to God. I essentially look at these 3 verses 10 through 12, as essentially saying, and God, if you heal me from this, I'll praise you. I'll live for you. And you know, that's kind of a theme in humanity. Sometimes we make a bargain with God. God, if you relieve me from this, I'll never get into this again. If you give me this blessing, I'll never do that again, or I'll always do this for you. You know, we sometimes barter with God. And essentially that seems to be what the psalmist is doing. God, if I die, no one's going to be able to praise you. So don't let me die. Let me praise you. I will praise you with my life. Don't destroy me. Verse 11, I will live for you if you don't destroy me. Verse 12, don't take me to the darkness. Keep me in the light and I will speak of your light. Seems to be the implication in these 3 verses. We move from the challenges that he presents to God to the confusion, verses 13 through 18. The psalmist is confused. I want you to notice this because this is a real important theme in our lives as humans. Sometimes we are confused with troubles. Sometimes we don't know the answers. And you know, dear friends, there are times we need to realize that this side of eternity, we may never know certain answers. In fact, we won't know certain answers. You know, I referenced the book of Job a moment ago. Job, according to inspiration, never learned that it was Satan behind his problems. God never said at the end of the book, hey, by the way, it was Satan that brought all about those problems on you. No, God let Job have the security to know that God was there for him, but he never really revealed it all to Job. At least it's not revealed to us. I find that interesting. There are problems I will go through in my life. There are struggles that you may be going through right now that you may never know the answer to. You may never know why this happened to you. But one thing's for certain, with God on our side, we can get through it. Now the psalmist presents some confusion in the last portion, 13 through 18. But unto thee have I cried, O Lord, and in the morning shall my prayer prevent thee? Lord, why castest thou off my soul? Why hidest thou thy face from me? I am afflicted and ready to die from my youth up. While I suffer thy terrors, I am distracted. Thy fierce wrath go over me. Thy terrors have cut me off. They come round about me daily like water. They compass me about together. Lover and friend hast thou put far from me, and mine acquaintance into the darkness. Now, he's confused here. Remember, he's going through some debilitating disease, something that's great in his life. He feels like he's going to die. And I want you to notice this. He's saying he's confused. God, firstly, there's really 4 confusions. Number 1, there's no answer. Verse 13. But unto thee have I cried, O Lord, and in the morning shall my prayer prevent thee? God, I haven't seen an answer from you. I've poured out my heart to you day and night, and I don't see any answer. So his confusion is there's no answer. Number two, there's no association. Look at verse 14. Lord, why castest thou off my soul? Why hidest thou thy face from me? He said, God, you're not close. At least he didn't feel like God was close. He said, I've poured out my heart. There's no answer. I look around. You're not there. There's no association. Thirdly, there's no assistance. Look at verses 15 through 17. I'm afflicted and ready to die from my youth up. While I suffer thy terrors, I'm distracted. I don't see any assistance here, God. Verse 16, thy fierce wrath go over me. Thy terrors have cut me off. They came round about me daily like water. They compassed me about together. God, it just seems like I'm swimming in problems. And I don't see any assistance from you. I don't see any answer from you. I don't see any association with you. I don't see any assistance from you. Now look at verse 18. Now this is interesting. He's really confused about this. The fourth confusion, verse 18, there's no acquaintance. Lover and friend hast thou put far from me, and mine acquaintance into the darkness. Do you notice that? There's indication here that his wife is not even there to support him, which many scholars believe that's why they believe this could be leprosy that he was suffering from. Because if he was a leper, he would not have association with his wife. His friends have been put far from him. Well, if he was a leper, he would not have his friends. I want you to put yourself in the psalmist's shoes for a minute. If this man, and this is a hypothetical, but if this man were married and had children and then became a leper, can you imagine not being able to hug your children? Not being able to love on them and show your affection toward them? If he was a leper, he was placed and banned from his family, banned from his friends, banned from society. He felt like God had forsaken him. And dear friends, he ends the psalm with confusion. He doesn't get the answer he wanted. He doesn't get the assistance. He doesn't have the acquaintance with God that he's looking for. He doesn't have the acquaintance with his friends and his lover. They're gone. He's left all alone, or at least that's how he feels. But that's really not the case as we're going to look at the application section. Let's move to that application section. There are three major applications that I want to look at here. And I'll be honest with you, I know the psalm doesn't end in a bright spot. And that's not my personality. I don't like to leave you with the psalmist in this bad predicament. But that's where the Bible leaves us with this one. It doesn't show us the bright spot, but I think if we look hard enough, we'll see a couple of bright spots. There are three things I want to notice by way of application. Number one, and this may be the most important, the circumstances of life. That's what we first need to consider. Life is not fair. Dear friends, nor is life always easy. And I can almost hear the amens through the audio all throughout anybody who's listening to this. If you have lived life very long, you know that life's not fair. You also, if you've lived very long, you know that life is not easy. In fact, life can be downright very difficult at times. It seems to be more difficult for some than others, but it is difficult for all people. Troubles and turmoil are simply a result of living in a fallen world. We need to remember that. As we live in the flesh, we are going to suffer. We're going to have problems. You can't get out of it. That's the circumstances of life. Every human being will face difficulties in his life. He will face, or she will face, difficult times. Now, I want to remind you of this. The circumstances of life are sure. We will face difficult times. There are two ways to face difficulties. Number one, we can face it with God on our side and with our help. Or we can face it without God and having no help. I don't know about you, dear friend, but I'm going to suffer. I'm going to face difficulties in life. I want to have God on my side. I want to have God for my strength. I know that this world is not going to be fair. And listen, it's not fair for Christians and it's not fair for non-Christians. It's not fair for humanity. The world was never expected to be fair. It wasn't fair since the first sin entered. And dear friends, it's not going to be fair. It'll never be fair. But I don't know about you, but I want to have God on my side as I go through these unfair circumstances. As I go through these frustrations, the circumstances of life, I need my God. It's the only way I can get through this life and into the next life called eternity. We move from the circumstances of life to realizing, number two, the comfort of prayer. You know, in the midst of a dark pit, just like the psalmist was, Communion with God through prayer is a rock that we can hold on to, something that will not move. I don't know about you, but there are times in a person's life when all they have is prayer. Now, let me tell you, I'm not suggesting we need any more than that, but there are times in life when we don't have our friends, we don't have our family. We feel as though nobody's there to support us. Dear friends, we always have the opportunity to pray to God. If we're right with God, 1 Peter 3 and verse 12, His ears are open to our prayers. He will hear. 1 Peter 5:7, He wants us to cast our cares upon Him because He cares for us. And so take that burden you're carrying and have that comfort of prayer. Drop it in the Lord's hands. There's a major strength. And I think as Christians, we need to really focus on this. There is a major strength that comes about simply of talking to God about a situation in my life. It may be an unfair situation. It may be a situation with health or finances or something that's just not right. Give it to God. Put it over in His court. God, this is not right. I've got this debilitating disease and it's not fair that I have it. Go ahead, talk to God about it. God, this is going on in my family and I don't know why that's the case. Talk to God about it. There is comfort in getting those problems out. You know, for a long time, people that deal with the mind have shown that talking about problems is very therapeutic. Well, let me tell you, there is no better therapy than talking to God about your problems. He's the one that's always open. He's the one that always listens. And He's the one that doesn't repeat them to anybody else. Pour your heart out to God. There's strength and comfort in praying. I want you to think about when you come to the proverbial end of the rope. And that's where the psalmist is in Psalm 88. He's at the end of his rope. Remembering God's power and His promises through prayer is a stronghold. Sometimes it's all that we have to hold on to. But dear friends, I promise you, if we hold on properly, it will be all that we need to get us through those difficult times. We learn about the circumstances of life. We learn about the comfort of prayer. Number 3, and this is great, we learn about the confidence in heaven. You know, the fact of the matter is, troubles and problems that occur in this life make heaven that much sweeter. I don't know about you, but I tend to think more about heaven and long and thirst for heaven when I'm going through a struggle in my life. When things are good, I kind of say, you know, not today, God. I'm not ready to go. But I'll tell you, when I'm on my knees, when I'm having a problem in my life, and I just feel like I don't really care anymore, I don't want any more problems, God, you know what? It makes heaven seem so much sweeter. When we experience life's heartaches, it proves to us, it shows to us clearly that this world is not our home. May I submit to you, dear friends, may I remind you that this world is not our home. We are, as the song says, just passing through. We're pilgrims in a strange land. I don't belong on earth. And if you're faithful to God, neither do you. And you know what? I'm not taking residency up here very long. I may be here, if the good Lord is willing, 70 years. I may be here 80 years, as we'll look at next week in Psalm 90. But let me tell you something. I'm not here permanently. My residence is laid up in heaven. My citizenship is in heaven. And I'm looking forward to the day when I can leave this pilgrim life and I can go to a place where I can set up residency and be a full-time eternal resident in heaven above. I don't know about you, but that makes heaven sweeter to me when I see the problems that life brings. In conclusion, there's a story that is told that really drives Psalm 88 home, helps us understand it. There was a story told that God once told a man to spend some time pushing on a huge boulder. And so in faithful obedience, the man gave himself to the wearisome task. Early in the morning, late in the evening, he would push on this big boulder. He would put all his energy into this big boulder. In fact, he called every muscle into action. He tried to move that boulder with all his might. He pushed and he pushed, exerting every bit of energy he had toward moving that boulder. Well, you know what? After many, many days, he had not moved the rock even a 1/16 of an inch. It had not moved. He said, I'm getting nowhere. He was discouraged. And his spirit began to talk within him, saying, you're not getting anywhere. What are you doing this for? Well, in addition, there was another voice outside of him, and it was the devil talking to him. The devil said, "You know what? You are wasting your time. You've worked so hard to try to please God, to try to move this boulder. For what? Your efforts have been a waste of time. You can't move this huge boulder. Give up. Why are you spending your time doing something completely useless?" Well, finally, he had enough. He listened to the devil. He listened to his negative voice, and he said to God, "I've had enough. I'm done. I quit. I've worked so many days. I've put so much energy into moving this rock. And look at it. It has not moved even a fraction of an inch. I'm through. You know, God, get someone else to do your work," he said. God lovingly smiled and said, "My son, I did not ask you to move the rock. I simply asked you to push on the rock. You've done what I asked, and now look at your arms. Your arms have grown from consistent exercise. Look at your back muscles. They too have grown and become stronger. Your efforts were not useless. The exercise I gave you made you into the man I wanted you to be. You see, son, I asked you to push on the boulder, not for what you would do to the boulder, but what the boulder would do for you." That really drives Psalm 88 home in my mind. There are times when I have boulders in my life that they seem like they will not move. That's where the psalmist was. "God, I have cried to you day and night. My boulder won't move." But God lovingly reminded him, "Listen, I didn't put you here to push on that boulder for the boulder's sake. I put the boulder there for your sake, to strengthen you and to purify you." Dear friends, when we spend time on our knees, pouring our hearts out to God, strengthening our spiritual lives, that is not time wasted. I would encourage you to be strong in the Lord in the power of His might. Whatever boulder you face today, bring it to God. All the while knowing that no matter what answer He gives you, no matter what you face in this life, His grace is sufficient for you to handle it. Dear friends, I am so thankful you could join us for this great study in Psalm 88. I hope it has lifted your spirit like it has lifted mine. I hope it will help you through the trials you may be going through today, or if not, through the trials you may face tomorrow. We're so thankful when you join us. We look forward to being with you again next week. As we look into Psalm 90, if you want to read ahead, read Psalm 90, the only psalm in the Psalter that Moses is given credit for penning. Let's look at Psalm 90 next week, and we'll study a great portion of God's Word again together. Thank you for being with us. May God bless you until we see each other again. Thank you.